I let my daughter-in-law host her baby shower at my house, and less than a month later, she actually tried to kick me out of my own living room during the party. My name is Madison Pearson. I am 65 years old, and I have lived in the same 4-bedroom house for 3 decades. My husband passed away 5 years ago, leaving me the property fully paid off. It is not a mansion, but it is spacious with a wraparound porch, a large updated kitchen, and a backyard I maintain myself. It is my sanctuary. My son Leo is a good man, but has a spine made of wet spaghetti. He married Brooke 2 years ago. Brooke is a woman who constantly measures her life against the people she follows on social media. She cares deeply about appearances, aesthetics, and making sure everyone knows she is succeeding. We tolerate each other. I keep my distance, and she usually pretends I do not exist unless she needs something. That need arrived when she was 6 months pregnant. She called me sounding frantic, claiming every venue she wanted for her baby shower was either booked or ridiculously expensive. She and Leo lived in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment that barely fit a dining table. "Your house is perfect," Brooke told me over the phone, her voice dripping with sudden affection. "It has the space, the natural light, and it would save us so much money. I'll do all the work. You won't even have to lift a finger." I hesitated. I liked my quiet weekends. But she was carrying my first grandchild, and Leo had asked me privately to just give her this one win. I agreed under one condition: I live here, so the house remains functional for me, and nothing permanent changes. "Of course, Madison," she chirped. "I'm just going to set up some tables." I should have known her definition of just some tables was completely different from mine. The boundaries I set were tested almost immediately, and her true intentions for my home started bleeding through the cracks on day 1. The planning started 3 weeks before the shower. Brooke showed up with a clipboard, 2 friends I had never met, and a tape measure. She walked through my front door without knocking, using the spare key Leo had given her months ago for emergencies. I was sitting at my kitchen island drinking tea when she marched into the living room and started pointing at my furniture. "That recliner has to go to the garage," Brooke instructed her friend, gesturing to the leather chair my late husband used to read in. "And those family photos on the mantel clash with the eucalyptus theme. Put them in a box." I set my mug down. The ceramic clicked sharply against the granite counter, loud enough to stop her mid-sentence. I walked into the living room and stepped between her friend and the mantel. "Nothing goes in a box," I stated, keeping my voice entirely flat. "And the recliner stays exactly where it is." Brooke sighed, a long, exaggerated sound meant to signal her immense patience. "Madison, we need a cohesive look for the photos. My friends from the country club are coming. I just want it to look elevated. The photos make it look cluttered." "The aesthetic of this house is that it is my house," I replied. "If the country club friends don't like my mantel, they are welcome to look at the ceiling." Her friends exchanged awkward glances. Brooke's jaw tightened, but she forced a tight smile. She backed down, agreeing to just place some floral arrangements on the tables instead of moving my furniture. I stayed in the room the entire time they were there, watching them quietly. I did not offer them snacks. I did not make small talk. When they left, I checked the mantel. My photos were still there, but my husband's favorite armchair had been pushed 3 inches to the left to hide it slightly behind a potted plant. I pushed it back. She had retreated for the day, but I knew she was planning a much bigger erasure. A few days before the party, I was sorting through the mail on the entryway table when I found a heavy, cream-colored envelope. It had slipped behind the basket where I keep my keys. I opened it, assuming it was a stray piece of mail Leo had left behind. It was the official printed invitation to the baby shower. I read the elegant gold foil text 3 times. "Brooke and Leo invite you to celebrate the arrival of their baby boy. Join us at our home for an afternoon of joy." Below that was my address, our home, not Madison's home, not a family home. I picked up my phone and called Leo. He answered on the second ring, sounding exhausted. I read the invitation to him word for word. "Mom, it's just wording." Leo mumbled, background noise from his job site echoing behind him. The printer made a mistake, and it was too expensive to redo them. "Don't make a big deal out of it. She's pregnant and stressed." "A printer doesn't accidentally invent ownership," Leo, I corrected him. "She wrote the copy. I am not making a big deal out of it, but I am making a note of it." I hung up before he could offer another weak defense. I did not call Brooke. Arguing with her was a waste of breath. She would just twist the narrative and play the victim. Instead, I took action. I walked down the hallway to my master bedroom and my private office. I locked both doors. I removed the keys from the door frames and put them in my purse. I gathered my jewelry box, my financial documents, and a few sentimental items, ensuring everything of value was behind a solid wood door that Brooke could not open. I spent the rest of the evening reading a book in my living room, perfectly calm. The invitation was a red flag, a clear signal of how she viewed my space. I went to bed knowing exactly what kind of person I was dealing with. The real audacity, however, showed up on Saturday morning. The morning of the shower, my house was invaded by caterers, florists, and a rented espresso cart. Brooks arrived wearing a flowing white dress, barking orders at her friends. I stayed out of the way, making myself a cup of coffee, and sitting at the kitchen island in a nice blouse and slacks, ready to be a polite host. At exactly noon, the guests started arriving. Women carrying large gift bags flooded my hallway. I recognized a few family members, but most were Brooke's new social circle women with expensive bags and perfectly blown-out hair. I was about to walk into the living room to greet my sister when Brooke grabbed my elbow. Her grip was surprisingly tight. She pulled me into the walk-in pantry and pulled the door partially shut. "Madison, I need a huge favor," she whispered rapidly, her eyes darting toward the hallway. "Can you go run errands for the afternoon? Or maybe go to a movie?" I stared at her. "I live here. I am not leaving during a party." She let out a frustrated breath. "Look, a lot of these girls are wives of Leo's new bosses. They think we bought this place. If you're just standing around, it's going to be confusing. It ruins the whole image we are trying to build. You being here is making things awkward." I did not blink. I did not raise my voice. I simply looked at the hand she still had clamped on my elbow. She released it instantly. "You want me to leave my own home so you can pretend you own it to impress women you barely know?" I asked. "It's just for a few hours," she hissed. "Don't ruin this for us." "I am going to get a fresh cup of coffee," I told her, my voice perfectly level. "And then I am going to sit in my living room." Brooke's face went pale. She decided to play hardball, stepping into my path to block the door. But she forgot who actually held the power in this house. I did not push her. I simply reached out, grasped the pantry door handle, and pulled it wide open, exposing us to the kitchen where two of her friends were chatting near the cheese board. I stepped around. Brooke walked straight to the espresso cart and poured myself a fresh cup. Brooke scurried behind me, her face flushed red, trying to smile for her friends, while glaring daggers at my back. I walked directly into the center of the living room. A woman in a designer blazer was admiring the built-in bookshelves my husband had crafted. "These custom shelves are just gorgeous." "Brooke," the woman called out. "You guys really found a gem of a house?" Brooke froze in the doorway. I stepped forward and offered my hand to the woman. "Thank you," I smiled warmly. "My late husband built them. I'm Madison Pearson, Leo's mother. Welcome to my home." The room went entirely silent. The woman in the blazer shook my hand, her eyes darting between me and Brooke in sudden, deep confusion. "Oh," the woman stammered. Brooke mentioned she and Leo had finally closed on a place with a yard. "They are still in their apartment," I replied smoothly, taking a sip of my coffee. "I was just happy to lend them my living room for the afternoon. Please enjoy the catering." I walked over to my husband's recliner. The one she had tried to hide, sat down and crossed my legs. Brooke looked like she might actually combust. The networking illusion she had built shattered into a million pieces right there on my hardwood floor. The wealthy friends exchanged uncomfortable whispers, realizing they had been lied to. I spent the next 3 hours sitting right there, answering questions honestly and enjoying the party. Brooke avoided my side of the room entirely. The shower ended early, but the real storm was just brewing. The moment the front door clicked shut behind the last guest, Brooke whipped around to face me. The fake smiles evaporated. "You humiliated me on purpose," she yelled, throwing a handful of used napkins onto the dining table. "You just couldn't let me have one day. You had to make sure everyone knew you were the one in charge." I stood up and carried my empty coffee mug to the sink. I simply introduced myself in my own house, Brooke. If the truth humiliates you, that is a problem with your lies, not my manners. Leo walked into the kitchen carrying empty gift boxes from the porch. He looked between his furious wife and my calm demeanor. Mom, you really couldn't have just gone to a spa for the afternoon. Leo groaned, rubbing his temples. You know how much this meant to her. I turned the faucet off and dried my hands. I walked over to where Leo was standing. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. Leo, your wife asked me to vacate my property so she could claim it as her own. I will not be a ghost in my own life to make her feel important. I held out my right hand palm up. I need the spare key back. Now. Leo blinked, taken aback. Mom, don't do this. We need that key for emergencies. You clearly do not know what an emergency is, I said. The key. Brooke crossed her arms. Don't give it to her, Leo. I kept my hand out. I stared at my son, waiting for him to decide which woman's boundary he was going to respect. After a long, heavy silence, Leo reached into his pocket, detached the brass key from his ring, and placed it in my palm. We're leaving, Brooke snapped, grabbing her purse. I locked the door behind them and went to sleep in a perfectly quiet house, completely unaware of what the mail carrier would bring on Monday. Monday afternoon, I was pulling weeds in my front flower beds when a large delivery truck pulled into my driveway. The driver unloaded 3 massive, heavy cardboard boxes onto my porch. I wiped the dirt off my gardening gloves and checked the shipping labels. They were addressed to Brooke Pearson. My address was printed crystal clear beneath her name. The labels indicated the contents: a premium wooden crib, a changing table, and a nursery glider chair. I did not call Brooke. I took a picture of the labels and sent it to Leo with a single question mark. His phone call came 30 seconds later. Mom, listen, I was going to talk to you tonight. Our landlord hiked our rent up by 30%. We can't afford to renew the lease next month with the baby coming. I stared at the giant boxes on my porch. And how does that explain a nursery set being delivered to my front door? Leo sighed heavily. Brooke thought, since the spare room is just sitting there empty, we could transition in. She wanted to wait until after the shower to bring it up so the timing felt natural. She didn't want to borrow my house for a day. She was planning to move in permanently, orchestrating a slow-force takeover by changing her mailing address and moving furniture before even asking permission. Come get these boxes by tomorrow evening, or they go on the curb for bulk trash pickup, I stated. Mom, please. We have nowhere else to put them right now, he begged. Then you should have secured a storage unit, I replied, and hung up. I walked to the garage wall panel. Leo had the keypad code. I reset it immediately. I tested the new code twice to ensure the heavy door remained sealed. Friday afternoon, I found out exactly why I needed to change it. On Saturday morning, a 12-foot U-Haul truck backed slowly into my driveway. I was drinking my morning tea by the window, watching the absolute audacity unfold in real time. Leo hopped out of the driver's side, looking stressed and exhausted. Brooke emerged from the passenger side, her hands resting on her pregnant belly, looking expectantly at the house. They walked up to the garage. Leo punched in the old code. Nothing happened. He tried again. The door stayed shut. I unlocked the front door and stepped out onto the porch holding my mug. The code changed, I said loudly enough to carry over the idling truck engine. Leo jogged up the porch steps. Mom, we have to be out of the apartment by Monday. We've brought the first load. Just let us put this in the guest room while we figure things out. Brooke stood at the bottom of the steps. We are having a baby, Madison. Your grandchild. You cannot seriously leave us on the street when you have 3 empty bedrooms? I am not leaving you on the street, I replied, looking directly at Brooke. You are 2 adults with incomes. You can rent a smaller place, or you can stay at a motel. What you cannot do is ambush me with a moving truck and demand residency in a home you tried to kick me out of. This is family. Brooke yelled, her voice cracking. You're being incredibly selfish. I am being practical, I corrected her. I looked at Leo. The nursery boxes are stacked neatly by the side gate. Take them with you. I turned around, walked back inside, and shut the heavy oak door. I turned the deadbolt until it clicked solidly into place. They thought I would cave, if they waited me out, but they did not know my endurance. I watched through the peephole. They stood on the porch for 10 minutes. Leo knocked twice softly but didn't dare pound on the door. Brooke was pacing in the driveway, talking furiously into her cell phone, probably rallying her flying monkeys. They sat in the cab of the U-Haul in my driveway for a full hour. I did not open the door. I did not text them. I went to the kitchen and made a sandwich. Eventually, the truck engine revved, and they backed out of the driveway, driving away. That afternoon, my phone started buzzing. Texts from Brooke's mother, my sister, and a cousin poured in. How could you do this to a pregnant woman? Leo is your flesh and blood. I didn't argue with a single one of them. I simply swiped left and blocked their numbers. I had no interest in attending a trial where the jury had only heard half the evidence. Then I opened my laptop and logged into my bank account. For 3 years, I had been paying Leo's cell phone bill and his car insurance on autopay. It was a habit from when he was in college, a quiet financial string I had never bothered to cut because I wanted to help them save. I clicked cancel on both recurring transfers. If they were grown enough to orchestrate a hostile takeover of my property, they were grown enough to pay their own Geico premium. The house fell completely silent. The peace I cherished settled back into the walls. I spent the weekend gardening and reading, undisturbed. I had drawn a line in the concrete, and for the first time in years, nobody was stepping over it. A month later, the baby arrived. They ended up renting a tiny, overpriced one-bedroom apartment on the other side of town. The U-Haul had gone straight to a storage unit that they now had to pay for monthly. When my grandson was born, Leo sent me a text with a photo. I replied with congratulations and asked when it was a good time to visit. I drove to their new apartment on a Tuesday afternoon. The space was cramped, chaotic, and smelled faintly of sour milk. Brooke was sitting on a worn sofa, looking exhausted and deflated. Leo let me in, looking like he hadn't slept in a week. I brought a large box of diapers, a beautiful handmade blanket, and a generous gift card for groceries. I did not bring a check. I held my grandson for 20 minutes. He was beautiful. I smiled at him, handed him back to Leo, and stood up to leave. Leaving so soon, Brooke asked, a bitter edge slipping into her tired voice. Must be nice to go back to a huge quiet house all by yourself. I paused at the door and looked back at her. The old me might have felt a twinge of guilt. The old me might have offered to let them stay for just a few weeks to ease their burden. It is very nice, I agreed politely. It's peaceful. I didn't wait for a response. I walked down the narrow apartment hallway, got into my car, and drove home. When I pulled into my driveway, the house stood exactly as I had left it. I unlocked the front door, stepped inside, and breathed in the quiet air. There was no grand reunion, no tearful apologies, and no dramatic shifts in our family dynamic. But there was respect. I had taken back absolute control over my life, and I never had to defend my space again. If there's one thing I took away from Madison's story, it's that true peace sometimes requires a little bit of uncomfortable silence. We are so often conditioned to believe that because someone is family, we have to endlessly absorb their entitlement. We shrink ourselves and our boundaries just to keep the peace. But Madison reminded me that you don't have to set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. Setting a boundary isn't an act of cruelty, it's an act of self-preservation. You don't need to scream, argue, or justify your right to exist comfortably in your own space. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is just quietly say, no. Lock your doors and let the chips fall where they may. You should never have to feel like a guest in your own life. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. What would you have done if you were in Madison's shoes? Would you have handled it differently? Let me know down in the comments. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more real-life dramas, boundary-setting moments, and empowering stories, please hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. It really helps the channel grow, and it means the world to me. Thanks for hanging out with me today, and I'll see you in the next video. Remember, your peace is always worth protecting.